Coming up on Nebraska Stories, the striking quilts of foreign wars, reviving a prestigious drill team, the Cornhuskers' historic march at the Rose Parade, and fossil hunting along Nebraska's highways.
What you're looking at is a relatively new discovery in the quilt world, carefully pieced and expertly embellished. These quilts are made of richly colored wool.
They're so beautiful, they're so amazing, but yet they were created in a time of war.
Experts believe these quilts were made mostly from uniforms, some quilts dating back more than 200 years. Intricate piecework that used even the smallest scraps of fabric because, unlike today's mass production, cloth was far harder to come by before the 20th century. And it may surprise you to know, these quilts were not made by women.
We believe all these quilts were made by men. We believe they were all made probably in some kind of connection to a military movement, a military encampment, a military battle.
These quilts were also not made by American soldiers, but by members of the British military. And as the old military adage says, war is long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. When not fighting, soldiers did piecework to fend off boredom or to pass time while convalescing.
Beyond just the actual battles, it means loneliness and being away from your family and being removed from your comfort zone. Quilt-making is a meditative thing. It's a calming thing. It gives you such satisfaction to build a piece and to put it together and to create something. These quilts may be something that a soldier needed to survive what was really the horrors of war.
They are more commonly referred to as military quilts, and their discovery is credited to respected quilt historian Annette Jarrell of Australia. Jarrell serves as an advisor for the International Quilt Study Center and Museum in Lincoln.
We first got to know about Annette's collection of military quilts, or intarsia quilts, or political quilts, years ago when Annette made a presentation to our board and had just discovered these quilts and was really kind of just intrigued by them and beginning her research process.
Since the 1980s, Jarrell has amassed a collection of 200 military quilts. Last year, a small selection went on exhibit in the United States for the first time at the American Folk Art Museum.
She worked with the Folk Art Museum in New York City, and they actually did the selection of the quilts and wrote the text and the label copy for the show. We collaborated with them by loaning quilts from our collection for their exhibition and whatever information we could give them as far as the background of our pieces. It's been a great collaboration and really exciting to work with the Folk Art Museum.
2 quilts owned by the Quilt Museum are featured in the War and Peace exhibit. One depicts Austria during the days of the Holy Roman Empire.
Our quilt, the Holy Roman Empire, I think is really spectacular because it's architectural in its design, and it's got this the perspective, the sense of perspective in the images, and so it's a really sophisticated design, and it's actual buildings, we believe, that existed during the Holy Roman Empire in Austria. So Annette's been able to do, identification of a number of those buildings by doing history and looking at it.
Soldier's quilt was among the large donation given to the Quilt Museum by collectors Artist and Robert James.
We're actually sitting in front of the very first quilt that the Jameses collected. Artists loved it, I think, for just the overall design. It's just such a beautiful graphic piece and so intricate and unusual. Bob served in the military. That was a real connection to him. He's always had kind of a thing for quilts that had some kind of a military tie. So it was kind of a natural thing for him to collect these.
The exhibit features quilts that date back to 1750 and up to the 20th century. Because they were made by men who were connected to the military of the United Kingdom, the quilts reflect their imperial history.
They show a lot of influence of what was happening in Indian textiles. The next group is around the 1850s, where we see the Crimean War happening. And then we see one of our latest quilts, which was made in the 1890s by a soldier who was serving in Alaska with English troops. So quite likely he learned the technique from his UK compatriots, but actually made his own pieces. The piece that we have as a really particularly strong history and makes it even more important because of that connection to the US and because of that provenance that we have with it.
What is also unique about these quilts is the way they are constructed. It's a method called intarsia, a sort of inlaid patchwork. Boiled wool doesn't ravel, so there is no seam because the pieces are butted up next to each other and then sewn together. And because there is no seam, the top looks identical to the back.
It's a way that people could actually do a lot more figurative work and more complex designs. In fact, Annette's intarsia pieces that she has, the political pieces, the artist has taken an etching that was done of this fictitious meeting of all of these great minds from the UK. I think it's called the Valor and Intellect of Britain. The etching actually is the template then for the quilt because it's exactly the same size. And that was one of the amazing discoveries that Annette made. When she found the actual etching, identified it, actually purchased one, an original etching, and measured it and realized that the way they would have done the intarsia was to cut apart the etching and use that as their template and recreate that center panel.
The quilts are considered unusual and rare, but as more is learned about them, more are discovered in attics and closets.
We're still really in that process, though, of learning more and more about them. And that's why the pieces that are coming out of, say, family hands, pieces that were carried back from Europe, many, many years ago by families, those things are really important because they just keep giving us another little bit, and that's how we build that body of research on a style of quilt like this.
"5 minutes. All the hours of practice and more than a century of tradition all comes down to a 5-minute performance."
Order. Arms.
These members of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Pershing Rifles drill team choreograph every step they take, every movement of their hands, and every spin and toss of their rifles.
A lot of our training comes first with attention to detail, with learning how to march, regulation, work with the rifle. It's a lot of little details. It can be really hard, take a lot of tedious work.
Zachary Day has been immersed in the details of this program since he arrived on campus as an ROTC cadet. He learned all about the history of the Pershing rifles, dating back to the early 1890s, and the man who started the drill team, John J. Pershing. Pershing was a university military science professor who would go on to lead the U.S. forces in Europe during World War I. Through the years, the University of Nebraska rifle team named after him would be very successful, winning many competitions against the growing number of other drill teams across the country. But when Day arrived at UNL, the team had not performed in more than a decade.
When I came here, I was like, "You guys don't do drill? What?" I was like, okay, let's fix this. This is a model of a 1903, as you can see. These are the ones we perform.
Day and a handful of others went to work to restart the program. They turned their attention first to the Springfield 1903 rifles.
I don't know how long they've been there, but they were in complete disrepair. I'd say only one of them was actually able to be used.
Day put about $300 into parts and was able to repair the rifles. But with a drill team, especially a new one, performing such difficult routines, those rifles hit the ground again and again and again.
These are the practice rifles for a reason.
Hey, can you go grab the duct tape that's over there?
Yeah, go grab the duct tape.
Many of the fixes are made on the spot by members of the team.
It's a lot of hard work to try to fix them, considering most of them don't really have pieces that are around anymore. They're not Springfield 1903s. They're not in production anymore. It's a lot of money to try to buy pieces or even find them. So that's why we've tried to make our own, and we do with what we got, really.
And when you're spinning and tossing these rifles, they're not the only things that get beat up. And they have the scars to prove it.
You can't really see it, but there's a big scratch on my glasses. I was trying to do one a couple weeks ago, and the rifle got me in the middle of my right eye. I got kind of stabbed almost 20 minutes ago trying to do one of our moves. The rifle came down wrong and hit me right on the side.
Megan Dupre says the rifles can be rough and cut your hands, but it's all worth it for her. She's one of just a few females in the Pershing rifles.
You don't see many female Pershing riflemen. So, yeah, I think being a female in a male-dominated thing is awesome, and being a part of that and changing military culture and leadership is amazing.
The routines the drill team members perform usually start with a brainstorming session.
Now, if you were to throw me a blind toss right now, and I threw him one right now, and he threw that way right now, and
Mona,
see what I'm saying?
So I was like this.
Oh boy.
The idea is then tested through trial and error. Often plenty of trials and many errors.
A little more spin.
Until they get it just right.
Perfect. Do it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pershing rifles.
Of course, getting it perfect at practice is not as difficult as getting it perfect when you're performing in the spotlight with a crowd looking on.
From the time they say, now introducing Pershing rifles, the butterflies just start flying. And it's hard, your hands are shaking and you're like, oh man, am I remembering everything? And then yeah, you get done. It's so much fun. It's really a gratifying experience.
An experience just like the ones cadets had more than a century ago when they learned leadership, discipline, and how to spin a rifle from John J. Pershing.
It's just honorable and great to be able to spin a rifle. They've been doing this forever, like the same rifle.
Honestly, it's just kind of like we're his company. We want to be the best there is. We strive to be the best company, not just that we can be, but like the best company in the country. We're the national headquarters. It was started here. We want to show that we belong.
I think it's really cool that Pershing himself was here. He's such a great leader in World War I. And yeah, that affects me every day. I walk to my classes and look at the sign outside that says Pershing Rifles. And I think I'm a part of that.
Third, march!
There is no place like Nebraska, where they're all true blue, and we'll all stick together in all kinds of weather for dear old Nebraska, you.
Founded in 1879, the band numbered 12 and was known as the University of Nebraska Military Cadet Band. Musicians played standing in formation as cadets marched. There were no pregame or halftime shows since Nebraska didn't have a football team. A decade later, in 1890, a young Roscoe Pound rallied students to help persuade the university to fund a football program. A band member, Pound later became Dean of the Nebraska Law College and Dean of the Harvard Law School. In 1891, Lieutenant John J. Pershing joined the university as military commander. The lieutenant required musicians to march as well as play. A sports fan, Pershing thought the band and the cadets should perform at a football game. The first Nebraska halftime show was performed in 1893. By the early 1900s, the band played at all home games. Years later, General John J. Pershing was appointed Chief of Staff of the United States Army. By 1937, the band had grown to 162 members. Although still affiliated with the military, the band was led by Don Lentz, the Cornhuskers' first non-military director. Lentz discarded military grays for flashy red and white uniforms. Nebraska was one of the first college bands to present shows with entertaining music and marching that featured intricate designs. 1940 marked a major turning point for the University of Nebraska football and band programs. Nebraska and Stanford were scheduled to play in the Rose Bowl. After 50 years of football, this was Nebraska's first bowl game.
A lot of those have a lot of memories. Well, I have the meal ticket that I carried on the Rose Bowl trip, right over here. And I don't know why I didn't eat all the meals, but supper, 60 cents. December 30th, 1940.
Russ Swanson of Omaha played in the 1940 Nebraska Marching Band.
Over here I have the sweater that I earned in the Rose Bowl band. Size 38, which doesn't quite fit today, but I really enjoyed that. It was this Rose Bowl band, and very proud of it. I do have a few caps around here. I save newspapers. I have since 1970.
He saves everything.
Russ's Big Red Room is a personal tribute to his alma mater.
We figured out we attended 192 of those.
The Swansons have been to every home game but one in 35 years.
I think the band made me a fan of the football team. Oh man, we were excited. A lot of us had never really been out of the state, and to think that we were going to ride a train and go to California. It was the middle of the winter, and it was just great. We had a piano in the parlor car, and there was music going all the time, and everybody was having a good time.
Everyone was having a good time, but music director Don Lentz. A national music contract dispute barred Nebraska from playing their fight song during the Rose Bowl Parade radio broadcast. How could Nebraska march in a parade without playing There Is No Place Like Nebraska? The band needed another fight song, and fast. On the train ride to Los Angeles, Lentz and a few band members wrote a new Nebraska song. They borrowed the music from a public domain operetta, The Vagabond King.
Sons of toil and danger, will you serve a stranger and bow down to Burgundy?
The lyrics from the Song of the Vagabonds would be replaced with the band song. At the time, no one knew they were creating a lasting tradition.
Hail Nebraska, dear old Nebraska, hail Nebraska, you.
The band is always behind a group of horses in a parade. But we were right at the front of the parade, and it was just something else. I've never seen so many people along such a long route. But right in front of the main reviewing stand, we broke out in There Is No Place Like Nebraska. And one of the regents raced over to the band director, Don Lentz, and said, "Don, we weren't supposed to play that music, were we?" And Don's answer was, "We didn't do it intentionally." And we got by with it. And Nebraska had never been to a bowl game before. We kind of set a precedent of the band going, and the band has followed the team to every bowl since.
Between March and November, Shane Tucker crisscrosses Nebraska's highways in search of the state's most elusive former inhabitants. Tucker is a collector, seeking fossil evidence of Nebraska's prehistoric animal life. And much of his work is done solo in wide open spaces.
A lot of the animals we find in the Nebraska fossil record seem very foreign, you know, elephants, camels, horses like zebras, and it would have looked a lot more like Africa than Nebraska 13 million years ago.
Checking rocks, sediments, and crevices are a big part of Tucker's job as a paleontologist at the University of Nebraska State Museum.
Far less than 1% of the animals and their skeletons are ever preserved in the fossil records. It takes a lot of time learning the whole rock sequence within Nebraska. We determine fossils by the age and by the rocks that they're in.
Tucker drives 8,000 to 10,000 miles each year in his search for Nebraska's ancient wildlife. What makes Tucker's quest unique is his unlikely group of helpers.
We're sitting right up over here. He's going to grade for a 4-lane, but we're going to pay for a 2-lane.
What we're doing today is part of the Nebraska Highway Paleontology Program, which is a cooperative effort between the Nebraska Department of Roads and the University of Nebraska State Museum. I brought some bones out to kind of show you guys. This is a complete lower jaw from a bison. You're kind of looking for that kind of cream-colored bone. These go extinct 10 to 14,000 years ago. This is pretty typical of what we find on a road project once some heavy machinery hits a bone. It's a lot of little pieces, but those little pieces clue us into the area where the bone is eroding out of. And as you see in the bank here, more bones have eroded out. So we have the bottom end of a bison shoulder blade, and this is just one of the bones in the back region. Just by finding the fragments, it keys us into an area where we may find more complete bones. And I followed road construction projects throughout the state, throughout the year, in order to save fossils from destruction by heavy machinery.
Tucker checks 150 to 200 construction sites each year.
Nebraska's Highway Paleontology Program was the first of its kind anywhere in the nation. Started in 1960, and so we've been going for 55 years now, and in that time frame we found over 250,000 fossils. Fossils from nearly every county in the state, 91 of the 93 Nebraska counties.
This road cut along a rural highway in northwest Nebraska is the latest site.
Nebraska would have looked a lot different 13 million years ago. We would have had streams with very densely vegetated shorelines, subtropical forests. We would have had a lot of different animals living in those forests, things like elephants, camels, rhinoceros.
Today, Tucker is excavating with members of the University of Nebraska State Museum. And they're expecting a visit from a road construction crew.
The contractor's usually a bit hesitant, but when you tell them that they're going to still be able to work, they think it's pretty cool that they're going to be able to take part in this scientific discovery.
We're actually doing a road project. We've got a 9-mile of widening, cable guardrail, and resurfacing of the highway. We'd just stop here periodically every time it rained and see if something would come up. We'd spend 5 or 10 minutes looking, and then we continue going on with the project. I do notice there is some right over here. These pieces here. They must have been covered up. Now they were uncovered because of the rain. It's kind of interesting that we're finding this much stuff out of such small holes. Hopefully we can find something a little bigger and a lot better than what we are right now. So we'll take this over and show to Shane that we are still finding pieces in this area just from this small excavation site.
Hello. How are you doing today?
Good. Back again, huh?
Yeah, back again.
Well, we were checking on the pile for you, and it's kind of what we found after the rainstorms and stuff.
Okay. Well, this is super exciting. This is a little antelope jaw. You got part of the skull here with the teeth sticking down. This would be a little antelope that maybe a foot and a half tall. If we found the antler of it, we'd tell which species of it. And this big one here, this is cool. This is a camel metapodial. So basically these two bones in us have been fused together in a camel. So that's exciting. That would be a camel probably 4.5, 5 feet tall. It shows us there's really good potential for this particular road cut to produce fossils for us.
Well, that's good. I hope we find a few more.
Yeah, I hope so too.
2 hours south, another Rhodes Crew tip leads to more complete fossil remains.
Well, we have a skull and lower jaw of a fossil species of bison. Would have been roaming here somewhere between 14 and maybe 40,000 years ago. In addition to the skull and lower jaw, we're finding some of the vertebrae, maybe a portion of a rib here. So there's a fairly good chance we'll find an entire skeleton to this bison. Most people think of bison or buffalo as being native to the area, with the Native Americans hunting them, millions of them on the plains. They weren't native to the area. They actually were an immigrant that came over from Asia relatively late in the Ice Age. This particular species goes extinct along with horses and camels and mammoths about 14,000 years ago. So this is a stream channel that's 6 to 7 million years old.
Sharing this knowledge at events like this community dig connects the public to the mission of the Highway Paleontology program.
This is an active scientific quarry, so all the fossils have to go back to the university. It's a chunk of a bigger bone. We've collected over 15,000 fossils, mostly small things, and I guarantee everybody will find a bone, or at least a chip of bone today.
It would be a flake of enamel
that tells us something about either climate or habitat, and each piece is more or less a piece to the big jigsaw puzzle. And the more pieces to the jigsaw puzzle we have, the clearer picture we have as to what Nebraska looked like many thousands or many millions of years ago.
Watch more Nebraska Stories on our website, Facebook, and YouTube. Nebraska Stories is funded by the Margaret and Martha Thomas Foundation.